American Chopper is perhaps one of the most popular motorcycle reality TV shows to ever come on TV. While people were attracted to the intrigue that the show provided because of the amazing bikes and the Tuttles built, they stayed because of the drama.
I'll bash your friggin' skull and stop.
Give me the...
Here, you wanna play?
No, I don't wanna play.
It's easy to call the American Chopper a show about bikes, but it isn't that. While bikes are the rationale for the show, it's clear that the drama between the people working together on the show is an important element for its success. The friction, the drama, and the fights on the show at times were simply too explosive to watch. And it wasn't just the fights either. American Choppers was a daredevil show that crossed almost every reality TV show boundary that there was to cross. The show had everything from financial woes, legal troubles, and even thrown chairs. It doesn't matter if it was on the screen or off it. American Chopper always had something going on with it that made fans gasp. And in this video, we'll be giving a complete and comprehensive rundown of these moments, and how the showrunners might just have gone too far. While the fights between Tuttles Sr. and Jr. are the obvious points to start this video at, they are certainly not the only incredible moments of the show. Yes, the American Chopper sometimes went too far in a bad way, but sometimes the show also went too far in a great way. For example, the Tuttles did build a custom chopper in honor of the firemen who died during 9/11. If you've been watching the show since the very first episode, you'd remember that during the very first 3 episodes, the Orange County Choppers built a chopper to honor the 343 firefighters who died on 9/11.
And it was a heartfelt tribute to the 343 firemen that died in 9/11. The theme was really cool. This was a big bike.
This bike is still the most famous one they have in their shop. There have been some rumors that the Orange County Choppers didn't build the bike and it was made for them. However, that's far from the truth. The bike was built in the same way the show said it was built. That means the Tuttles actually sourced parts from different states to show unity and national pride. For example, the gas tank was made in California, the engine carburetor was made from Texas, the wheels were made in New Hampshire, and the swing arm was manufactured in Oklahoma. And yes, the bolt that Tuttles Sr. himself welded on top of the fuel tank was sourced from Ground Zero itself. It's little wonder the bike became a symbol of the Orange County Choppers, and the die-cast miniatures of the bike became a really popular toy. Speaking of the good things that the Orange County Choppers went too far in, it's important to remember that the shop also designed choppers for women. That means that the OCC goes out of its way to design choppers for women who want to enjoy riding a bike without being in the back seat. While OCC wasn't the pioneer of building bikes exclusively for women, they were one of the first to follow that trend, and that's a huge positive for the Tuttles. If you watched the American Choppers and had a sinking feeling that Paul Tuttle got too angry for his good and probably had a history of substance abuse, you wouldn't be wrong at all, because it's completely true. While the show doesn't explicitly talk about Paul's struggles with substance abuse when he was younger, it's very possible to extrapolate that fact from the angry bursts that Paul often had. In his book called The Ride of a Lifetime, Paul Tuttles Sr. spoke about his addiction to drugs and alcohol that lasted for over 15 years. As expected, it ruined his life. Thankfully, his wife eventually convinced him to go through successful rehabilitation treatment. Aside from Paul Tuttle's early struggles with substance abuse, another thing you probably didn't know about the show was the fact that the Orange County Choppers weren't exactly the first choice for the show. Craig Piligian, the creator of the American Chopper original series, has revealed that the Tuttle family business wasn't his first choice for the reality show. His initial inspiration for the show was another bike shop. Now, we don't know the name of this other bike shop, but what we do know is that this bike shop would have focused a lot more on the technical aspects of assembling bikes. So why were the Tuttles chosen instead? Well, the answer is drama. Craig saw that the Tuttles had the potential to add drama to the show, given the already apparent internal friction between father and son, and decided to go for it. While the American Choppers did end prematurely, it's obvious that the show was overall a massive success due to the dramatic element of the Tuttles.
What'd you do on this bike?
What are you talking about?
Just what I said.
Ben, did we equally work on this bike?
Yeah, listen.
Wait a minute, did we
listen.
equally work on this bike?
Every time I come out here, Vinny's doing a job and you're holding his hand.
Me and him split everything. We started yesterday.
Get your hands hands dirty for a change. Do some welding and grinding instead of watching everybody else do it.
You got an awfully nice house for what I did. You got an awfully nice house for what I did.
And now to the spicy bits. There's usually a lot of talks about whether the father and son fights on the American choppers were real or fake. While these fights looked real enough, it's sensible to doubt whether they happened or were scripted. After all, reality TV shows still have scripts and aren't always what they seem. Now, we won't deny that the American choppers had scripts. A lot of the time, the drama between father and son was manufactured by the showrunners. But that doesn't mean that Tuttles didn't have their drama. In fact, by the 5th season of the show, there was no longer any need for the showrunners to manufacture drama for the Tuttles. They were doing it all on their own. Of course, it's easy to dismiss this on screen, but it's hard to wish away the off-screen incidents that show that there was no love lost between Paul Tuttle Sr. and Jr. For example, the older Tuttle was conspicuously absent at the wedding of his son. That's right, Paul Tuttle made sure he didn't go to his son's wedding, even though he was invited. But the one incident that showed just how bad the relationship between father and son was actually on screen. In the now viral meme template, Tuttle Sr. invited his son into his office to speak about his demeanor at work. According to the senior Tuttle, Tuttle Jr. was one of the worst employees he'd ever worked with. He came to work late, left early, took extremely long breaks, and was generally nonchalant about working. Paul Jr., on the other hand, told his father that he was mistaken, and the Orange County Choppers would have been nowhere without him. This enraged his father, and as tensions grew, the men took on more aggressive stances. Tuttle Sr., in obvious rage, decided to start throwing things, and Tuttle Jr. replied in kind. At the end of it all, Paulie decided it was time to fire his son, and that's exactly what he did. And all of that was caught on camera. The scene was so explosive that it eventually became a viral meme, as no one believed that something like that could be released on television. But it happened, and it got released. Unsurprisingly, a few months after that, the show got cancelled as the fight between father and son had gone off-screen and had gone into the courts. While Paul Tuttle Sr. might have thought he had the express right to fire his erring son on live television, the law didn't exactly agree with him. Yes, Paul Sr. had the right to fire his son from the OCC if he wanted. However, he didn't have the right to stop his son from appearing on the show. And by firing his son from the OCC, that's exactly what he did. Paul Jr. and the TLC, the network that the show aired on, didn't take kindly to this at all, and they had to inform Paul Sr. of the legal consequences of what he'd done. That was what forced Paulie's hand and made him allow Paul Jr. to return to the show. However, this time, he returned as a contractor and not just an employee of the OCC. The fights between father and son on the show were not the only moments that went too far on the American Choppers. The show was also accused of copyright infringement by lots of chopper builders. One of the more prominent accusations came from a handicapped person named Chris Devances, who claimed that he had given OCC the idea of a tricycle that was accessible to people who have to use wheelchairs. This claim was so strong that Mr. Devances decided to sue the company in court. However, the case was dismissed and the show was able to keep its toes out of yet another controversy. Another high-profile controversy that the OCC got itself involved in was building a bike for the social programs created by Brazilian President Lula da Silva, who was previously a metal worker. The Tuttles took loads of pictures with the president and the bike, and at the time that seemed like a good idea. Right now, not so much, since no one knows where the bike is, and the former president is now in jail after being convicted of corruption. Overall, the American Choppers was a daredevil show about daredevil men who built daredevil bikes and had daredevil fights with one another. Did the showrunners go too far on certain occasions? Yes, they did. But does that take away from the awesomeness that the show was while it aired? Certainly not.